Hey, Tim Frisch with A Frisch Perspective, your Christian nerd bringing you analysis, reviews, and fun. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a lesson that we can learn from Kanye West based on a tweet that he sent out recently. Now, I want to say I don't really follow Kanye West, and anything that I say in this video is not an endorsement of everything that he says and does. But I did hear about a tweet that he put out that made a really good point, and I'd like to look at it here. It says, "I cried at the thought of aborting my firstborn, and everyone was so concerned about me. I'm concerned for the world that feels you shouldn't cry about this subject." So apparently Kanye West was talking about his firstborn possibly being aborted. That was considered. And ultimately, the choice was made to bring the child into this world, and he cries at the thought of not having that child. And people were voicing reaction and concern about him. Is he going off the rails? Is he emotionally out of sorts? But he says it's actually more concerning how the world feels that you shouldn't be emotional about a subject like this. And I think that's a really good point. The other day I did a video about Todd White, a Christian speaker, and how he was giving this message, God's heart for humanity. And he was very emotional. He was very overwhelmed at the thought of the gospel. And some people look at that and say, well, why is he getting so emotional? I mean, he's been a pastor for a long time. Why is he getting so emotional about these things that a lot of Christians know about? People should know about them. But in relationship to that, I saw an interesting quote attributed to James White, which said, "Your overall understanding of theology may be far more consistent than Todd White's has ever been. But I have to ask myself and anyone else, when was the last time you cried when speaking of God's gospel and your unworthiness?" Just a thought. So I saw that online. I don't know if that's the exact quote from James White, but it sounds like basically a point that he was making, that it is a good thing that Todd White was emotional. And this to me is connected with what Kanye West is saying here, that of course I'm emotional about a subject like this that I'm talking about here. What's interesting as we talk about our emotional reactions to things, I was thinking about a National League Championship Series game that I went to 12 years ago with my wife, and it was a Phillies game, of course. And they were in this really big series. I mean, this was really important. And the crowd, it was packed in that stadium. And let me tell you, the Phillies were behind, and they came back with some home runs, and there was emotion in that stadium. People were going crazy. And if you were a Phillies fan, it was an awesome experience. It was wonderful to be in that environment. But what were they getting so emotional and excited about? It was about people taking a wooden bat and hitting a ball with it and running around a field. I mean, that's what they were getting so excited about. So to me, if we can get so excited about things like baseball, which at the end of the day aren't really that important, then I think the real question is, why are we so unemotional about really important things? And I think that's a really good point that's brought up in Kanye West's tweet. Actually, it's weird that we wouldn't be emotional when thinking about matters of our children's life and death. And when we think about the importance of the gospel of Jesus, emotion should be there. So I think that what we saw in Todd White was actually more equivalent to what the gospel deserves than how a lot of us feel and react when we think about those things. Now, I understand a lot of things affect our emotions. Our environment affects our emotions. We can also become emotionally fatigued if we are hearing about an issue over and over. We get desensitized to things that we've experienced repeatedly. And I know for a lot of Christians, we do feel deeply about things like the gospel, but it is something we've gotten used to. And what I'm saying is, maybe we're too used to it. Maybe we need to be more like Todd White. Maybe we need to be more like Kanye West and really take a look at our lack of emotion. So if we can get so emotional about so many things that at the end of the day aren't really the end of the world, they can even be somewhat trivial, and yet we get so emotional about them, then I really don't think we should be so concerned and think it's strange if someone has a lot of emotion on a subject like abortion, like Kanye West does, or the subject of the gospel, like Todd White does. And for me, it really causes me to say, I need to look at what am I emotional about? What is it that really stirs my emotions? And a real pointed question here is, am I more concerned about something like the government, for example, than something like the gospel? Now, of course, there are things about the government we should be concerned about, and everything going in our culture, of course, it stirs up our emotions. But how long are these things that we're dealing with going to last compared to what the gospel is talking about? We're really talking about temporary things versus eternal things. And we have to keep that in mind as Christians. So yes, we can get emotional to some degree about the circumstances we're facing and choices we have to make. But when it comes to matters of life and death and eternity, those are the things we should be most emotional about. And so I'm really happy to see Kanye West being emotional about something as important as the subject of abortion. And I agree with him. I think it's more concerning that people in our culture think it's strange. And the same with Todd White. I think it's great that he's really feeling this emotion. And so I agree with the sentiment from James White there. I think really we should all take a look. Why am I not feeling more emotional about something as important as the gospel and God's amazing grace in my life? So this in no way is to put down anybody or to say, if you're not feeling emotion right this second, you're a problem. I'm not saying anything like that. But I am saying, looking at people causes us to take a look at ourselves. And when we see they're so emotional, it's so easy to react to that and say, yeah, why are they acting that way? Especially if it's out of the norm. And the point I'm making is that it may be out of the norm, but when you actually think about what they're dealing with and what they're talking about, it's actually a really normal, logical reaction when you consider the subject matter that they're dealing with. And so really this is a call to me and all of us to make sure that we take a look at what is it that we're allowing to affect our emotions the most. And of course, there are things we need to think about, but we can get riled up about things that are temporary, and we need to make sure we keep emotion at the right level, and things that are eternal and that are the most important to who we are as human beings. Those are the things that I think we should be the most emotional about. And if we're not, I think it means we need to take a look at what are we focusing on and what are we prioritizing in our lives. So it's a challenge to all of us, but personally I'm thankful for these experiences that we're seeing. And these are cultural icons, someone like Kanye West, Todd White in the Christian world, a very popular speaker. And I know we have a lot of criticisms and we question, well, what are all their motives? And people are always trying to figure out where other people are at spiritually. But all I'm saying is, regardless of all of that, there's a lot we can learn in these people about emotion. And looking at the question, am I actually as emotionally affected as I should be about the most important matters of life? So those are some thoughts that I wanted to share. I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. But as always, try to keep those comments positive and edifying to the conversation. And thank you so much for listening to what I have to say from A Frisch Perspective.